Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Everybody at home, welcome to our Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up. So as you can make again, where we look at everything to do with the London market, talent, technology, culture, and brand and trust, and all that good stuff. Today we've got Maddie Bailey back with us again, a friend of the show, and we're going to be chatting to her about being exceptional in the London market. And we're going to be introducing some techniques and also perhaps an offer for all your loyal listeners and viewers at home. So that's it. So to get things going, let's do news of the week. Okay, I'll go first, Ben. I have good week and bad week, I suppose. Two items of news. So the first one was this. I spotted in the Insurance Post, Virgin Atlantic dropped insurance broker due to alleged lack of hard market know-how. This was at the conference. Josh Cryer, who's the risk manager at Virgin Atlantic, kind of dropping the broker because of that lack of customer service. And what I kind of started to do a little bit of research into this, and I found that actually came out of the AIRMIC Pulse survey, where they survey their members to find out about customer service and things like that. I think the continued deterioration in member renewal experience that goes beyond market prices is quite a thing. Here are the results, just so you've got them there. All the metrics have gone up there, but there's two that I've just highlighted on the right-hand side, which is increasing cover exclusion and poor and late communication from insurance partners. And the reason I highlighted those is because those are a real key determinants for customer experience. And they're also in control, within people's organizations control a lot of this stuff.
I think one is that we're getting very similar issues coming through in our surveys too from the brokers in terms of particularly around communication from carriers. I think it varies across different carriers as always. Some are doing it well and some are not, and then similarly within classes. I think in mitigation, obviously, we've had the COVID situation and working from home, so communication has been challenging. I think you come on to that. But even so, this, to me, smacks of the lack of effective collaboration going on between those partners. And that's the key word for me, is that, this should be something now. We've had knowledge of the hardening market and the changing market from pre-COVID times. So it isn't like it's just happened.
Yeah.
And actually, the industry has got to start to get this right, because, obviously we're never going to have the clients, dancing around joyfully because of higher rates, but you can massively offset that by improving the experience and explaining and communicating. And this is kind of basic stuff, but the industry still does not do this communication thing well at all.
And there was a couple of other things I just wanted to take out of the report. So, and this is a theme that was really we highlighted in our special with Savills, where we were talking about the future of the office. And this is just highlighted here. I think we were talking in that show quite a lot about sales and how difficult it would be to do that virtually. And this is now starting to come through in risk manager experience. So in the current environment, one-to-ones are difficult to be had virtually. And the telling thing, and it doesn't have the same effect. So that's just a point I wanted to touch on. The other thing that I thought was interesting was the final kind of quote of the report, which just says that customer experience is going to be the key determinator for renewals going forward. And if you look at the wide, outside of insurance, customer experience is where the big play is. That price and your product and your service offering are not what customers stay loyal to. It's the experience they have when they buy the product or they receive the service that really is where the loyalty lies, and where a lot of companies are putting put in money and resource. And I think this is just telling that also filters through into the commercial world. And quite often you get pushback from people going, well, it's just not the same in commercial insurance. It's different. It's as you were touching on last week, Ben, they're complex products and all this kind of stuff, and actually it does make a difference, the experience, and it's going to be interesting how that plays out going forward.
Yeah, and it's about people, and it's about communication, and it's really saying that people are the key pivot, when you're talking about communication, and that is it's being realized, and obviously it's being somewhat diagnosed here by the clients, but I still think that the industry has to start to invest going forward in this, and not just because I'm saying you should fix things, but because actually it's a huge opportunity for those that get it right. And that's where I struggle a bit to understand why it doesn't get a higher priority. I mean, it probably needs some numbers put on it to help the industry to understand what the benefit is ultimately, as opposed to just carrying on in the same old way, just letting it all run itself in a way.
It's a bad week there. Here we go. I've got a jingle for this. Kids booing. There we are.
Yeah. I'm feeling depressed now.
Yeah, well, let me cheer you up.
I need uplifting.
So, good news this week. Tour de France finished at the weekend, and it was the most exciting Tour de France for almost 30 years. I think 1989 is probably the benchmark of exciting tour finishes. But I said last week that there was a favourite but not a certainty, and it played out on the final one. We've got Podcar there overturning almost a minute in deficit arrears to beat Roglic by almost a minute. Incredible. And when Roglic came over the line, he knew he'd lost it, and he was just white. I don't know if you saw that. It was just...
I did, yeah, it was awful.
And
felt very sorry for him.
It's cruelest, but obviously on the other side, joy. So amazing scenes there.
And, an interesting parallel is that team played it by the numbers to some extent. And in retrospect, they just didn't allow, earlier on in the race, Roglic to sort of have his head and just go for it and put an even bigger buffer, which Pogačar would never have achieved. But the other side is then you've got this kind of youthful devil may care, do anything attitude. And he just did something that was, incredible. And they say it's the best Tour de France ever, I think, don't they?
Indeed. So have you got some news, Ben, leading in, or are we going to...
Yes, it's sort of stat of the week, and I think we'll come back onto this, but I want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, this article that came out today, which is kind of lucky for me because it's very helpful to the things I'm trying to talk about in terms of what businesses could focus on, particularly around the diversity issue. And what Sathnam Sanghera is saying in the Times, who writes in the business section of the Times today, is that in actual fact, while there's a very obvious ethical argument to Black Lives Matter and other arguments around diversity for business, it really is about the bottom line. And what he focuses on here is the attitudes of Generation Z, but young people in America in particular, and there are parallels in the article to the UK as well. But in America, where 90% of Generation Z support Black Lives Matter, and that translates into, if I just look at my notes, 86 million people in the United States. So fundamentally, business cannot afford to ignore that, he says. And he also refers, interestingly, to a Korn Ferry survey which looked at B Corps, where they have deliberately invested in ethical social issues, and they have recorded sales increases up to 4 times greater than their competitors, which is if anything, I think this says a number of things to me. One is that the diversity issue is a bottom line and a growth issue for business, and also that you really do need to start to look at the numbers and to start to understand what's going on to achieve that. And these really big corporations are doing that, and so it's a really good article, and he's made some sensible and really empirical points.
Cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. and I'm sure we're going to come on and talk about this a bit more with Maddie as well. Did you also want to bring in the...
Yeah, I'll just touch on it and then we'll come back to it with Maddie. But basically, this was one of the reasons I picked up on the article in the Times, is that we have been talking and looking at data on gender in our own surveys and finding these big differences in women's attitudes towards particular insurers around, in this case, honesty or trustworthiness. So what this chart is really showing is that for a number, in fact, quite a lot of insurers, women are actually, and this is female brokers, are actually quite negative about them in terms of how trustworthy they are. And men tend to sort of just be fairly static in their views of them, so that it's not occurring to them in the same way when we ask this question. And there are one or two brands that are doing better. Now, when we, what we're looking at in this now is to say, could we forecast this forward? Because this is based on the current gender balance that we get in the market, about 80-20, so 80 in favor of men. Now, this is going to change clearly, because that is the drive in the marketplace. So we're going to hopefully get to at least an equal gender balance. And what that will do, actually, when we see the numbers, and I'll bring these out in future, is that there will be a ratchet effect. So if you're not, if effectively women don't want to work for you or don't want to place business with you or do business with you, then that effect will ratchet up the more women there are in the market. So this will become a serious issue for those businesses that don't start to understand the reasons why. And I think we want to talk to Maddie about some of her thoughts on that as we chat later or in a minute.
Indeed. So why don't we introduce Maddie? So let's move things along. So Maddie Bailey, friend of the show, welcome. Let me turn on your camera. I'll play your jingle as well. Hang on. Guest of the week. Hi, Maddie. How are you doing?
It's so seamless, this show now, isn't it, from the beginning?
It is.
Oh, God. There we go. Microphone's not on.
My phone.
I spoke too soon.
Look at that. Let me see if I can request that.
I'm in.
You're in.
There you go.
I'm in. Hi, guys. It's really great to see you guys again.
Hi, Maddie.
Hi.
I said it was seamless, and then the bloody mic didn't work.
I know my phone connects to my laptop, unfortunately, and someone rang as you introduced me. So I was cutting them off quite rudely, but here I am.
In the edit, it'll look good.
Brilliant.
So welcome back, Maddie. Thanks for coming along. So we're looking at being exceptional in the London market, and it's a theme that we've been touching on throughout the series, the first and the second series, and looking at talent and the purpose of work within the London market, and kind of discussing the way that interlinks with brands and purpose and the implications for leadership as well. And I think Ben, you leaded nice into it with your survey there.
Yeah, I just thought, just before you talk about some of the stuff that you're going to talk about, Maddie, I thought it'd be interesting to just get your view on that sort of gender issue that we brought up. I don't think gender's the only issue; it's obviously to do with diversity. But what are some of the reasons there and behind it? Sure.
So just by way of introduction for people who don't know me, I guess I'm a qualified lawyer. As I'm a reformed lawyer, because I don't really practice any formal capacity at the moment. But I've worked in the London market throughout my career. I worked at Gen Re Faraday, and I worked at MS Amman for a long time. And I left the market and kind of big insurance corporate just over a year ago now. And I set up my own consultancy. And the reason why I did that mainly was because as a woman in business and thinking around what was it that I really wanted out of life, because you only really get one go to do the stuff that you do. What was important to me, and I think the slides that you just showed, Ben, kind of highlighted some of the reasons why I wanted to really be able to determine my future in a more specific way. And I think it really kind of boiled down to my view on how authentic are the companies that we're working for, and what is it that they're doing that really helps me to be the best that I want to be, and in fact helps everybody to be the best that they want to be. And I guess I got a little jaded by a bit of this, here's our purpose on the laminate, study it, because if you're not that, you're out kind of stuff. And it kind of coincided a lot with my work with Dan Cable, who's Professor of Organizational Psychology at London Business School, around this idea that it's really up to you to determine what's right for you and your future, and some techniques around how you might think about that. So I think this point around authenticity and creating the space where people can really self-determine, I think for me personally, was one of the biggest factors.
Yeah. And do you think now that sort of because what we're talking about here is you're referring to really as leadership in the market, and how does leadership deal with this, versus the idea almost that you can get a kind of organic change going as well within the market. So what's the kind of balance for you, Maddie? Well,
I mean, it's often said that the London market's overmanaged and underled, and I don't know how much that resonates with people, but
I haven't heard that before. That's very good.
There are some fantastic leaders in our sector. There really are. But there are also some people who are only really there to drive the numbers and the bottom line, without really focusing on what it is that they're getting their people to do that really serves their customers the best. And maybe that's really where it kind of comes down to me. And I think when we think about leadership and we think around how do leaders help people to, really, I'm going to go back to this point around self-determination, but to really self-determine to do what they do in the way that enables them to be their best, but it's still, at the same time, still achieve the organizational goals. And I think, there's that, I think that's oftentimes something that leaders lose sight of. They just want the results, that they don't really want to think around the human side, if you will, around what that might look like. And I think for me, part of this is around, for me anyways, is my view that for the most part, I think some of our systems of management aren't really designed to help people to be an individual. They're really just designed to ensure people get done what they are there to do at a specialist level. And all the systems around that are, you'll get punished if you don't do it in that particular way. Whereas I think that there are other ways that and really some simple techniques that leaders could use to really kind of switch the conversation to everyone in my business as an individual, as much as every one of my customers is an individual, and I'm there to serve their needs and to personalize what I sell to them that best suits their needs. And I think those things need to work together.
And is it to Sathnam Sangira's point, and I've heard this from other people, and I think you may have said it as well, I can't remember, but from the last show, but is it to get this change to start to happen in leadership, or to get them to realize, is it part of the solution to get them to sort of give them some numbers that show that there is a business case to be made, or otherwise does it not work?
Well, I think there's absolutely, you have asked me this question before.
Sorry.
I think generally leaders want to see evidence that there'll be some statistical significance to their bottom line if they develop these new strategies, and that's a fair point. But at the same time, some of the strategies that we're thinking around, especially around developed strategies around purpose and around really understanding the kind of biological basis for why people do things and what's the right environment. I mean, those things have been statistically found already, and there's more than 40 years of research that shows that.
And so when we talk about the idea of an organization, or in this case the insurance businesses, where do you now sort of sit around that idea of purpose? Because I think it is still a lot of the work that I do, I still come back to, in a lot of it, I think, to saying I don't care what the word is, but I come back to saying you do need to have some kind of guiding light. One of my colleagues likes to call it a North Star, something that gets, where are you on that now, Maddie? Because that seems to be a really, sort of tricky question, and it bothers me as a consultant, because I always worry about it.
I'm in favor of companies having a corporate purpose. I think that's I think it does tend to align people to a common organizational, North Star, if you will. But what I'm firmly against is the marketing kind of lipstick that goes around that sometimes, not always. And I think this is where the leadership point comes in. For me, it's really around what is it that the leaders in the organizations are saying around how they are going to help people to be that individual that will help them achieve that purpose. And I think this is where the Dan Cable stuff is really interesting to me, because I think there are some really simple strategies that you can develop around purpose. And it might be helpful, I think, just to talk a little bit around some of the biological bases for why organizations might want to think about this. So the Dan Cable research talks around what he calls the fear system in the brain. So that's traditional ways of management, if you will. If you don't do this, you will be punished, for example. And I think those kind of management practices kind of are old, for one thing. They grew up out of the Industrial Revolution, where doing one thing was really important. And I think, as you've probably spoken about in many shows, that's not the way that insurance is delivered in a contemporary insurance business. And the other part of the brain is what he calls the seeking system. And this is the part of the brain that lights up when a person is in an environment where they are encouraged to be their best. And I think functionally, without even thinking about it, and this has been proven, human beings are biologically more attuned to be creative, to be more playful, and to look to find meaning in their circumstances when you light up that part of the brain. And a lot of it's got to do with things like giving your body gets a jolt of dopamine, for example, when you feel personal purpose in what you're doing. So it's not just enough to say, here's my laminated purpose, go and study it, because I don't think people really engage with that at an emotional level.
And do you think this is something that this biological thing is something that also people are alluding to when they talk about this kind of Zoom?
I think so.
Fatigue and all of that sort of stuff, because this has come up over and over again. It's not just us talking about it clearly, but in the specific chats that we've had on this show, it has come up a lot about how debilitating this environment is for all of those senses.
I'd agree with that. And there are some really simple things that you can do that aren't expensive. And the one that I was going to mention on the show, and this is my offer to the Burgess and Bolton listeners, is there's one tool that I've used and that I've done many times, actually, and it's been the one that I think had the most emotional impact on me, positive impact on me, and it's called Best Self, and it's developed based on the Dan Cable philosophy of, if you can experience people showing you or telling you who you are at your best, it just opens up an emotional reaction that's actually very, very powerful. And shall I explain how the tool works?
Yeah,
so,
do.
So and it's really simple. It's not a psychometric assessment. You don't get told you are this, or you are a 1, a 2, an A, or a B. All it is an invitation to the person who's doing the tool or doing the exercise to invite a number of people from their social, business, and personal life to say a paragraph or provide a photograph or a small video clip of of an example, a specific example of who the person is when they're at their best. Yeah. And it's very, very simple. That's all it is. We did it at Amlin when I was there, and it was fantastic for those people who engaged with it. And actually, there were some underwriters and other people within the business who actually found it extremely moving. Just to hear, and lots of people afterwards said, I never knew that person thought that about me, or I never realized that when I do that, that's actually something I'm really good at. I just take it for granted that's what I do. So it's a very, very simple tool. There's you don't get told that, labeled or anything like that. And I would say it's a deeply personal tool actually as well, because you need to have some time to understand what people are saying, and I think there's this emotion of gratitude that comes out, which I think is really helpful for people.
And can I just ask how it played out in the team? So once those underwriters, those hard-nosed underwriters, have gone through this kind of quite a soft experience, very personal experience as you just described, how did that impact them as in the team or within the organization? How did that manifest itself?
So my experience with them when we ran the exercise was they felt that they were more valued and that they were seen as a person, and this is my personal reaction to it, they might say something else. They were seen as an individual rather than just the specialist who does X. Okay. So by going through this exercise, let's call it that they got feedback on elements of their working life, social life, or whatever, their life that was positive, and then they could then reflect and perhaps see things through a different lens. And yeah, I think so. And I think it's got to do with this point around having meaning in what you do, and it really goes to it goes back to the point of who are you, why do you do what you do, and why does it matter? And it's not intended to, you know, you don't have a set of goals that you go after and try and accomplish afterwards, although you might try to do that. But it's really, for me, around, as an individual, understanding I'm actually valuable and what I contribute is valuable. And it's about me as the individual rather than me, you know, only performing a specific thing that I'm there to do. And I think that's a powerful thing to do for people.
I think we talked about this earlier this week, Maddie, but we were talking about how different questions like the honesty one we asked earlier on occur to people. And what I think we concluded was that actually a word like honesty and trust in this market currently occurs very differently to men than it does to women. So what this feels like to me, and this exercise will be really, really interesting, is that in a way you kind of got to jolt those people who are not thinking about this stuff into a slightly different parallel space to say, actually, you do, to get them thinking, and then you do change a lot by doing that. But it seems to me that already many women, probably for lots of obvious reasons, are already sensitized to a lot of that, you know, so they do respond and react to a one-word question in a different way, a very different way, actually, which is fascinating to me.
It is really interesting. And I obviously can only speak from my own personal experience, but I can certainly relate to the survey. Absolutely.
Yes, it makes sense to me as well, because of all the things I'd got fed back. You know, when we did like we do a ranking of underwriters, and it's 90% men, right? And I get lots of angry emails from women in the market saying, why don't you include women? And I always have to write back and say, well, it's because there aren't that many women, and even women tend to mention men, you know, so we're all trapped in a way by this. It'd be great to do this exercise and just to reflect on it, to see how it helps, how it can help people to get out of that. Hate the word, but paradigm, I suppose.
Yeah, it's great, and that's my offer. And you know, we can work out how we roll it out through Burgess and Bolton.
Yeah,
it'll be a great.
Thank you very much, Maddie. I think it's brilliant. It's great. I mean, we never thought we'd be able to do a free offer on this show for one thing. That's the first. It's going to be all over the internet. Don't worry. No, so we'll market it to our audience first. You know, the loyal supporters that we have, and then we'll. Would you come back in a few? If you're going to look at the analysis, would you come back and we can talk through it and we can find ways of presenting it back? It'll be fascinating.
And just to remind people that it's based on this book from Dan Cable. This is his, it's not his most recent one. His most recent one is called Exceptional, Developing Your Personal Highlight Reel. And I think the best self exercise is mentioned in this book, but it's what you get out of it is the exceptional part, and really thinking about your highlight reel. And maybe the exercise really is your highlight reel for who you can be at your best.
Great stuff.
We've got to get a cross-section of underwriters to do this.
Yeah, well, come on, guys. Let's go.
We can. I think we can. I've been set the challenge. I think we can do it.
Let's do it. Great.
Do you, just a quick question, Maddie? COVID, we've touched on it, and we've touched on it with everybody. Has this accelerated things, do you think, in this space, in this, the kind of psychological space, or is it not? Or is it all going to click back to where we were before?
I think what it's accelerated is this feeling that things are never going to be the same as what they were before COVID-19, and I think that everyone recognizes the need to have strategies that really help people to deliver at what they need to do at their best. And for the most part, I think people have risen to some of the technological challenges around how you do business in a virtual environment. But I think strategies like this best self could form, a very simple part of a toolkit that says, actually, even though I can't be in the room with you and actually develop that personal rapport by being face to face, I might be able to have other ways in which I can really encourage, that just helps people to just connect with what they're there to do.
Yeah.
That's really.
I think interesting, just as a point, I think Dominic Christian has been talking quite a bit about this and talking about it well, actually, from Aon, about, the issue of mental health and actually also about particularly listening to young people. And the shows that we did with Savills, Katrina on there from Savills was talking about exactly this need for a focus on particularly younger people and mental health and working practices going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think resilience is really important. And the more help that you can help, give people to be more resilient in simple ways, I think is really important. I was interested by your Black Lives Matter slide that you showed, and it made me reflect. I don't know, and also the connection to Generation Z. I don't know how many of the audience are CrossFitters. I came to CrossFit quite late in my life. I'm the oldest in the room when I go, but and lots of people will know this if you're an ardent CrossFitter. But so CrossFit as an organization is worth billions of dollars. They're sponsored by Reebok globally, and the George Floyd tragedy was unfortunately commented on by the CEO in not a great way, and he said it. And Reebok pulled their sponsorship, and all the member clubs who subscribed to the CrossFit franchise all pulled out of their franchise agreements, and that's a business reputation decimated in a nanosecond, and the CEO had to step down. So it really does just show you that this stuff's really important, and thinking about.
And I think when you look, I mean, I recall that was really a Ratner moment, wasn't it, for that business? I mean, it's incredible that he would have said those things, but there we are. But hubris of leadership, I guess. But I think actually at the AMIC conference this week, there was quite a good session on reputational risk and so on, actually, which I think people could, if they can get to that, would be worth having a look at. But going back to the insurance industry, we were talking last week about, the business interruption FCA test case, and how, I was very clear about that. I think it is I don't think it's quite a Ratner moment, but I think it's a low for the industry. And I think it's such a shame that it's kind of still knocking around within that narrow legal context and not, as we talked about earlier, in the customer context. And I think that's
and I don't think we can, paint everyone with the same tar brush, because I think certain insurers have really reacted positively to their handle, and others haven't. So, well done to those who responded in a positive way.
Yeah, I think that is the problem, isn't it? That it has sort of painted right across the industry, and certain players have acted in ways that have damaged other players. And I think that ought to be reflected on, because it's an interconnected business, and all this kind of all the partnerships that you have, particularly in a syndicated market, goes right back to the idea of collaboration, really, because there's such a huge reputational risk for the industry if they don't get that right. And what I was trying to get to was, I think that COVID may well have increased the reputational focus, for people in the market, because they are looking at how industries and businesses and even governments behave all the time now. So they're much more sensitized to it.
Yeah. I think we spoke on a previous call around, and possibly not, but I think it might have been a different TenTech webinar where we talked about there was actually a pandemic product developed that no one wanted to buy, because the idea of the 1 in 100 risk really, people didn't want to have to pay the premium to protect against it. And then of course it happened and people were clamoring for the product. Reputation matters. And to me, it goes down to the point around trust as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I as I said last week, I think it's also about innovating and looking forward. And I think you can say to the industry, and it is saying to itself within the industry, I think that we need to look forward much more, not just at things that have happened, and closing the stable door after the horse has bolted, but actually looking much more outwardly and more curious about things that we could deal with. And I hope that happens, but it's a challenge, and I think it's for others to take that forward. I think.
Yeah, and being exceptional doesn't just happen, does it? It means it happens because you built for it. So those strategies and the simple ones that we've been talking about in this call, I think I really recommend people to look at them. They're easy to roll out.
Just to your point as well, Maddie, about insurers behaving differently, I think that's something that we're seeing in the data, but also is coming up in a lot of conversations I'm having with insurers as to who's had a good pandemic, if you like,
Yeah.
And there are certain players that have clearly, evidentially done really, really well, and it's clear exactly what they've done. And a lot of that has been built around communications, getting on the front foot, being proactive about issues. I mean, Admiral was a very good case in point, not in the London market, but just paying that £25 to every motor policyholder because they weren't going to get claims. Wow, wasn't much money to them in terms of their balance sheet, but it made a massive difference to their reputation. And I'm guessing, not that I know Admiral, but I bet it's changed their whole attitude internally to how they look at customers and reputation and everything else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you look at other insurance companies like Lemonade, for example, that kind of really behind their strategy, and I think the IPO really reflected that kind of approach and their desire to respond to Generation Z and their buying needs.
And also that you can have a business that can have soft messages that have a value as well. And I think, a lot of the insurance commentators on that Lemonade IPO and financial commentators, to me, kind of missed the point a bit as to why it was valuable.
I agree with you on that.
And in a way, sometimes it's just things that are just trendy and get the zeitgeist that are valuable, and you can't really necessarily pin down all the reasons exactly why. Just people like them, right? And they buy it. So I think insurance people often, to your point about the people driving the numbers, they find that very, very hard to understand, and it irks them as well. It really annoys them. So it's great. Right.
It's been, we're almost out of time. So thank you ever so much, Maddie. We will talk about how we get this offer out to you, our loyal viewers, over the next few days and weeks. And then we'll invite you back, Maddie, and we'll reflect on the results.
I'll look forward to that. Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Great.
Thanks, Maddie.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Super. That's very kind of her, isn't it? That's great.
Oh, it's excellent. Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting as well. I think if we can get a number of people to to take part, which no doubt we can, be brilliant. You and me can do it.
Yeah, definitely. So let's wrap things up. What are we doing this weekend? Obviously nothing, because we're not allowed to, and if we do, it'll be our fault. But whatever, Brexit, COVID, whatever you want. But anyway, anything good?
I know, you're right. We're going to have to weekend activities cancelled for 6 months. No, we can still go out till 10 o'clock. Let's look on the bright side. Yeah, that's it. But it is cold and autumnal and a little bit miserable.
Yeah, I say but mind you, you light a fire, open a bottle of wine, and happy days.
What a lovely thought.
There we go. Excellent. Great to see you again, Ben. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Have a great weekend. The offer's coming soon.
Yes. Stick with us. Goodbye.
Burgess & Bolton's Weekly Wrap-Up.